when we get into office, which we will, January of 2023, we are turning it all around and we're fixing our election system for once and for all.
Joining us online is Kari Lake. She is a gubernatorial candidate in Arizona, widely expected when first nominated to be trailing her opponent. Instead, she appears to be winning and winning handily. Kari Lake, thanks so much for joining the program. Great to talk to you.
It's great to be here.
So why don't we talk about how the dynamics of this race have shifted? So when you were first nominated, the sort of convenient political talk was that you were going to lose handily to Katie Hobbs. Instead, you've been essentially taking her all day long. She's refused to debate you. You're obviously very fluent on TV. She is not. Well, what do you think is the real reason why Katie Hobbs' candidacy has fallen down and yours has been soaring?
Well, she's a horrible candidate. She has dismal policies, destructive policies. She's a bad communicator. She can't articulate anything with any understanding for the average person. And she's cowardice. Besides that, she's the Secretary of State here in Arizona, and she has run that office with great incompetency. Even the Arizona Supreme Court calls her incompetent in a role as Secretary of State. I don't think she has any confidence in her abilities, and that's why she avoids debates and getting into the center ring with us, so to speak.
So, Kari, one of the things that has happened in your particular race is that the President of the United States is obviously targeting you. He did a speech last night in which he suggested that people who have questions about the 2020 election are essentially undermining the democracy of the United States. He suggested there are 300 Republicans across the land in true McCarthy fashion. He's sort of waving around a document saying there are 300 Republicans who deny election results, and they're going to endanger democracy. What did you make of President Biden's speech last night?
You know, I didn't watch his speech last night. I was busy campaigning and talking to the people of Arizona. I figure it was much like his last one where he's trying to call us names and calling Americans terrorists and such. Listen, we have the freedom of speech in this country, and we are able to question our government, and we are able to question our elections when there are problems. And we will not stop doing that until we have free, fair, honest elections. And I'll tell you what, Ben, everywhere I go, and I've been around this state for 520 days now, traveling back and forth, talking to massive crowds. We have a bigger political movement than we've ever seen in this state. And everywhere I go, one of the top issues besides border is our elections. People want honest elections. They have no faith in our elections. And this is Joe Biden and the mainstream media once again trying to silence Americans on a very important issue. If we don't have a secure border and if we don't have secure, honest elections, we won't have a country much longer.
So, Kari, what are the elements that you think would make it possible for there to be a secure election? There have been a lot of complaints from people on the right about election 2020. The president of the United States, Donald Trump, filed a bevy of lawsuits, virtually all of which were rejected. What exactly do you think would have to change in order for people to have trust in future elections?
Well, there's a lot of things that have to change. We have terrible voter rolls that are filled with people who've moved many, many years ago, sometimes decades ago. We've got people who aren't alive anymore on our voter rolls. And we have people, and this is common, Ben, who will receive 3 and 4 and 5 ballots at their home, and there's only one voter there. We have to clean that kind of stuff up. A lot of mail-in ballots floating around is a recipe for fraud. And we don't want to have that kind of election run that way in Arizona. And so there's going to be a lot of things that we have to do to clean up our elections. But I want to work with our state legislature so that we can enact laws that every Arizonan, whether they be Democrat, Independent, or Republican, knows that their one legal vote counts. They go to bed on election night. They know the winner. We're not counting votes for 10 days. And they can go to bed knowing that whether their guy won or lost, they believe in the system, they trust in the system, and the system is transparent. We don't have that right now. There'll be a lot of different steps we have to take, I believe, to have truly honest elections. And I'm willing to work with the lawmakers. The legislators, according to the Constitution, are the ones that write our election laws. And I want to work with them to make sure that it's a level playing field and people have faith in our elections, that they're being run honestly.
One of the things that I think the media were counting on is making you the face of the election in Arizona. And among Arizonans, that's just not the case. Typically, elections are a referendum on the party in power, and that's true particularly in midterm elections. Obviously, Doug Ducey has been the governor of Arizona, but people generally in Arizona think that he's done a pretty good job as a Republican. Broadly speaking, federally, people think that Joe Biden has done a terrible job. And so this has become a referendum on people like Katie Hobbs. she's been asked some pretty honest questions about abortion, and she has no limits. And she's a very radical candidate. She was masquerading as moderate at the beginning. She is not a moderate.
Not at all. I think she's the most radical opponent or radical Democrat we've ever had run for statewide office. You know, she's completely opposed to border security, even though she's changing her stance right now because she knows that's unpopular. As a state senator, she voted against a border wall, a virtual border wall. She voted against funding our border strike force twice. And she also voted against even asking the federal government to reimburse us for some of the costs that we incur because of our wide open border. At the same time, she co-sponsored a piece of legislation to introduce sex education beginning in kindergarten. That's radical. I don't know any mother or father who wants adults talking to their 5-year-old about sex in any way. And she does have a radical view on abortion. And I was happy to point that out and really pressure the media, the fake news media in this town, to pin her down on her stance on abortion. They try to make someone who's pro-life look like a radical. I want to save as many babies as possible and help as many women as possible. She is for abortion right up until the moment of birth and even after. When she had an opportunity to vote for a piece of legislation that would have provided a baby who survived an abortion medical treatment, she voted no on that legislation, opting rather to have that baby die on a cold metal medical tray than give that baby life-saving help. She is a monster. She's radical. She loves California's policies that have driven that state into despair and driven people to leave that state in huge numbers. And she wants to do that to Arizona. Not to mention, Ben, she's a twice convicted racist who's cost the taxpayers nearly $3 million for her racial and sexual discrimination against employees in her office when she paid a single Black mother $30,000 less than the men in the office doing the exact same job. But the fake news media is carrying her water for her, and they will not cover these stories.
So, Kari, why don't you talk a little bit about sort of your personal political transformation? So back in 2008, you were actually a registered Democrat. Obviously, something changed. What changed so that you are such a strong conservative voice today?
Well, I registered as a Republican when I turned 18 in 1988. Ronald Reagan was a hero of mine. We were from about the same part of the country. We grew up an hour apart, obviously many decades apart, but he was the president of my youth, and I greatly admired him. And so I've been a registered Republican almost all my life. I registered as a Democrat for 4 years and as an independent for 2 years. I was really not happy with the wars that we'd gotten ourselves into. And I was looking at the candidates that were before us, and it was John McCain and a newcomer named Barack Obama. I had 2 small children at the time. Now my kids are adults. And I was looking at those 2 men saying, which one is going to get us out of this endless war? It was becoming an endless war. And I didn't think it was going to be John McCain. I covered him at that point for about 20 years as a fair and honest journalist here in Arizona. And so I took a chance on Barack Obama. And I was excited, the first Black president. I thought maybe he would heal some of the racial problems and issues we had in this country. And unfortunately, he did just the opposite. And surprisingly, Ben, he was in town last night, stumping for my opponent, who is a twice convicted racist. It's really quite astonishing that our first Black president would come to town and stump for a racist who's running for governor in this state. It's really quite shocking.
Kari, good luck in your race. And if people want to check out your campaign, where should they head?
Thank you for asking. KariLake.com, KARILAKE.com. Thanks so much for having me on, Ben.